Good evening, freshmen. Good evening, sophomores. Good evening, parents. This is an exciting night. We love to talk to underclassmen about how to prepare to get accepted. Because what you do now, whether you're in your early years of high school or even if you're in middle school and you're listening in, what you do now, the steps you take now can impact where you graduate from at 22 years old, what you do for a living at 25, 30, 35 years old. It happened to me. I went to an academy. I graduated in 2007, and it changed the trajectory of my life. Today, we coach young people throughout the country through this complex process to get into a service academy. And today, we just found out two of our clients, one of them got into West Point, and one of them got into the Air Force Academy. And we just know in the core of our being that is a game changer for their life and for their future. And so if you listen in, I truly believe you will grab onto something of value tonight that could possibly change the trajectory of your life and definitely will increase your chances of getting accepted. We've been coaching young people for 4 years through this process. And our success rate, I'm humbled to say, is outstanding. And so we believe we have a proven system that works, and that's why we want to spread that word to as many families, as many young people, that this is their dream and this is what they want to do. We want to spread it to as many people as we can. Okay, so that's our intent. And so this is what we're going to do tonight. First, we're going to share with you the scoring system that all academies use. Directionally speaking, academies vary between Naval Academy, West Point, Air Force Academy are the primary ones. There's also Coast Guard Academy and Merchant Marine Academy. But primarily those three, they have a lens through which they view you. If I can just transfer from what is in my head is in terms of how I see candidates when they sign up with us and we do a 360 assessment on them, because it's aligned with how the academies view young people. If I can transfer that knowledge into your head tonight, then you have a leg up on everyone in your congressional district. Guaranteed. We're going to talk about a scoring system which should give you a lens on how you should view yourself when you're applying or when you're preparing to apply to a service academy. Okay, so first is scoring system. Second, congressional nomination process. It's a requirement to get into a service academy. Third, we're going to share a timeline. Timeline matters. You got to get all this stuff done. And when you submit, your academy application matters. And we're going to talk about why that is, but just teaser, it's because of rolling admissions. He who submits first, all other things being equal, is going to have an advantage. Fourth, we're going to share what we think most underclassmen that we see struggle with. All right, so you can avoid the common pitfalls. That's fourth. Fifth, we're going to share our Academy Endeavor suggested solutions, recommendations for each of those common pitfalls. And last, we'll do Q&A. So the first thing, and this is the first slide we're going to show you, is the scoring system. So here is the scoring system on how academies view applicants. Not only how they view them, how they quantify them. Everything you are applying, if you want to apply to the service academy, you're applying to an engineering school. You're going to get a Bachelor of Science. That means you're going to take a bunch of engineering and physics and chemistry and calculus core classes, regardless if you major in English or history or engineering. You're applying to an engineering school, and so they're going to have an engineering approach to how they judge applicants. And this data that we're sharing with you, we took the average of all three of the big service academies and came up with one that is directionally correct for all three. What we want you to know is that the academies quantify everything they do, and it goes into an algorithm. West Point calls it the whole candidate score. Naval Academy calls it the whole person multiple. Air Force Academy calls it the selection composite score. They all have the same type of approach. First thing that jumps out is that the SAT, ACT, your standardized test score, it doesn't matter which one, SAT or ACT, they accept both, and there's no advantage to taking one or the other. From their standpoint. In fact, about 51%, or it's about 50-50. About 50% of young people submit an ACT and 50% submit an SAT. That is dependent on you and your SAT, ACT tutors as to what gives you the best advantage. But anyways, the single biggest slice of the pie, as you can see, is the SAT, ACT. That is 30% of the score. Some of them is even as high as 40%, they estimate. Okay. And by the way, this framework is based on publicly available data published by the RAND Corporation, okay, which is a government think tank. All right. The academies have unveiled a bit of their algorithm, sent it over to government think tank, and they published it over the years. Okay. And so this is accessible to you all. This is not secret squirrel stuff that we're just guessing on. This is fact. What you need to know from the SAT side of things in the scoring system is, first, the SAT or ACT, when colleges nowadays, post-COVID, colleges are doing away with this requirement, or have done away with this requirement. It's test optional. However, two things I want you to know. First, the academies have been consistent that this is their requirement. They only waived it 1 year, and that was due to COVID. It's back as soon as COVID was, I think by 2022, it was back and it was mandatory, earlier than all the other colleges. Second is you're starting to see a trend of the most prestigious colleges, Yale being one of them, saying we're going back to the SAT. This is our hypothesis, is because grade inflation around the country is so rampant, and because the differences between high schools and between areas of the country is so unstandardized that they need some sort of pull in the tent, so to speak, to be able to understand you and your academic ability. Having an SAT or ACT strategy for you as an underclassman is going to be huge. And we're going to share a little bit later in the timeline slide when we think you should start taking it, how many times we should think you should start taking it, and what's the average, etc. So we're going to dive more into that. All right. Second, your transcript matters, and it's 20%. Okay. And it's not just your GPA. It's your GPA and your class rank, how you compare to your peers. Most high schools have done away with a class rank, but understand this, your guidance counselor, when they submit the transcript to the academies will ask them to unmask your class rank so they can know how you compare versus your peers. Very important. So it's not just GPA, it's also class rank. It's your course load difficulty. That gets factored into the algorithm. So you have a 3.92 and you live in Maine, and somebody else has a 4.0 that never got a B and lives in California. That doesn't necessarily mean the 4.0 is stronger if they just took regular classes or they attended a school that was not very competitive. Not many young people were even going to college. Okay. So transcript matters in terms of GPA and class rank, in terms of course load difficulty, in terms of your performance in specific classes. The A that you got in ceramics is not as important as the A that you got in biology AP. To the academies, the 5 most important classes are calc, pre-calc, chemistry, physics, and bio. Why is that? Because you're applying to a STEM-focused school, and those grades that mirror an academy freshman curriculum gives them the greatest indication that when you go to the academy, you're going to do well or not do well. SAT, ACT, transcript is second. So academics is 50% of it. That's like bottom of the pyramid. If you don't succeed academically right now as a freshman, as a sophomore, you are setting yourself up for failure. You're shooting yourself in the foot, okay? It's 50% of the score. Athletics. What you need to know here is that the academies, contrary to most colleges, they separate athletics from non-athletics in your resume, in your activities list. They're going to zero in on that as separate. So if you have a big goose egg in athletics, but you've done all these other amazing things in your non-athletics, in your clubs and your community organizations, you're still 10% of that score could be a difference maker. Here's a stat for you. West Point, average class, 91% are varsity letter winners. 75% of the admits are varsity team captains. That is a significant amount. That means only 9% were not a varsity letter winner. And I want to know who those 9% are. I mean, seriously, what was their SAT score? And did they create the cure for cancer or what? Because that is going to be a must win for everyone on this call. Okay. Non-athletics, that's really where you show That's everything else. That's your work, that's your volunteer, your community service, that's your clubs on campus, that's your student councils, your Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. That is 10%, but let me tell you, that is sometimes where the rubber meets the road. That is something where you can differentiate yourself the most. Okay? Everything in pink there on your left, rec letters, essays, interview, CFA. CFA is the fitness assessment. That is the candidate fitness assessment. It's pass, fail. However, the academies also can see your score. So it's important you do as well as you possibly can on the candidate fitness assessment. What I was going to say about the other pink criteria there, that's where they're going to assess your character and your motivation to serve. Okay? You are preparing to, I'm assuming, by being on this call, you're at least investigating whether you should apply to a service academy once you're a junior and senior year of high school. The stated mission of all the academies are to develop leaders of character. So how important do you think leadership is going to be on your academy application? How important do you think character is going to be on your academy application? That's how they're going to define it. They're going to look at your essays. They're going to look at your interview score. Every single person is going to be interviewed that applies to an academy. And they're going to look at, so interviews, essays, and then rec letters. And that's going to come from your teachers and any optional recommenders that you ask. So that rounds out the score that adds up to 100%. However, there's more than that. There are a few other factors here that you must have. That is, one being your nomination, and two, DODMER, which is Department of Defense Medical Evaluation Review Board. It's an intrusive medical process where they're going to look at everything. They're going to ask 106 questions, and a lot of those questions pertain to not just current state, but history of your medical history. Okay, and these are pass-fail. You either have a nomination or you don't. If you don't, you're not getting accepted directly into the academy. The only option you have is prep school. And DODMER, you pass or you don't. And if you don't pass, then you need a waiver. Otherwise, if you don't get a waiver, you're not going to the academy. Okay, so a lot of steps here when primarily colleges are only looking at a few things. Like, they're not even asking for an SAT score anymore. They're looking at your transcript. They're looking at 10 activities off your Common App and 5 awards and your essays and maybe a few letters of rec, but there's no fitness, there's no nomination, there's no medical. Okay. There's no interview, there's no SAT. So it's really 5 criteria for the colleges. And that's what makes the academies so complex, is because the list of requirements is so much longer. Why do we surmise that is? Why do we think that? Are they just trying to make it hard for hard's sake? Maybe. Some people say that's true. My philosophy on this is that the academies ask more of you, yes, to test whether you truly want to go there, and they ask more of you to submit because they get more data on you than any other college in America. That means they can make better decisions on who's worthy of getting accepted. They can get to know you very well, and they can assess your character better than, and your overall whole person concept better than any other college in America. Service academies can do that because they have more data on you. All right. So if you know this end state is going to be how they grade you, it's kind of like when you show up to a class and the first day of class, they give you the syllabus. You're in your AP Lit class and they say, okay, ladies and gentlemen, 30% of your grade is going to be the final exam. 20% is going to be your midterm. Another 25% is going to be your essays that we do in class. We have 3 essays that we do live in class. And then another 25% is going to be your participation in class. Oh, well, now that I know how I'm being viewed, I can adjust. I'm giving it to you 2 years in advance, 3, 4, 5 years in advance before you get it. And therefore, you now can chart your path accordingly. That's the goal of this. Okay, so we've talked about the scoring system. We've talked about how academies view applicants, because that is the framework, that is the lens we want to jam into your head. Now we want to talk about the congressional nomination process. Okay, we don't have a slide for this. You're going to have to listen in here. We're going to take about 5 to 10 minutes and explain it. All right, federal law stipulates that a nomination is an academy missions requirement. And the purpose of the law, we believe, was to ensure that academy admits and therefore military officers are geographically representative of the country as a whole. Okay. So there are 435 congressional districts. There are 100 senators. There are 535 congressional offices, 435 plus 100. And they are not standardized across the country. They can have their own application process for their office and for their district. So the first step in understanding the congressional nomination process is to understand that you need to know your process, and your process is on your representatives' websites. The applications are out there, okay? So if you were to Google, I'm going to do it live right now. So this is a risk. Who knows what's coming up? But I would just say, Senator Bud, North Carolina, nomination. Okay? And I go to his website, which is bud.senate.gov. Okay? I go to constituent services. Okay? Student resources. Sometimes it's dug in here. Academy nominations. Okay? And there it is. Okay? Now, this looks like to be more of a landing page. All right? And they don't give us as much detail. But also, it's closed. You see it closed on October 31st. All right? So, therefore, they're not accepting nominations, and sometimes that happens. But the class of 2029, which are juniors right now, they need to bookmark this page and reach out at a later date. I'll go Warner, Virginia, Congressional nomination. Okay, Academy nominations, Mark Warner. Okay, so Senator in Virginia, see that there, and he's got a nice website. See how they're all unstandardized? I went to 2, didn't get much information. This guy, application, we got it right here. Here's the application. If you got any questions, here's who to ask. Here's the deadline. Okay, so if you're a junior, which I don't expect any of you to be, but if you were a junior, you would want to know that September 21st, most likely September 21st, 2024 is going to be your deadline, because they don't change very much as long as they got reelected and it's the same person. The deadlines are going to be directionally about the same time of year. Okay, so September, that's when you're finding out. And this is what got some details here. And this is even nice. This is coming up. This is an academy day. We highly suggest anybody that is interested in academy, find out if there's a service academy day in your district or in your state. In this case, Mark Warner has one, and it happens to be at Randolph-Macon College. You know, Virginia is a big state. But if you can drive across the country, do it and attend, find out more about the academies, shake hands with a few people. There might be some academy admissions representatives that you can ask questions to, be on your best behavior, etc. But this is ways that you're finding out. The whole purpose in doing that was to say you can take action today to get a little bit more organized and make the congressional nomination process a bit less daunting. All right? Because we're in the information age, we can do that. All right. So 535 congressional offices. The process depends on where you live. But what we're going to do is give generalized advice on what we see the common themes are among most offices. This is how the process works. I want to make this as simple as possible. Members of Congress can nominate up to 10 people per year per academy. That per academy part's really important because we always get a question at the end, which is, if I just get a service academy nomination, is that a blanket nomination that covers me for all service academies? No. You have to get a specific nomination. Like, you have to get a congressional nomination to a specific academy. Okay? So when Senator Warner or Senator Budd or Representative Fauci that we all looked up, they're going to award nominations to a specific academy. Okay? Another caveat, Coast Guard Academy, United States Coast Guard Academy is a service academy, does not require congressional nomination, does not require a nomination period. They're Department of Homeland Defense. They fall under a different Title 10 regulation that this doesn't pertain to them. So if you're applying to the academy, Coast Guard Academy, you can tune this out completely. Okay. All right. So how many nominations can a member of Congress give? 10. All right. So that's 10 for USAFA, 10 for Naval Academy, 10 for West Point. USAFA meaning Air Force Academy. Okay. So let's say you live in California and 100 people from your district apply to the Air Force Academy. Since your congressman only has 10 nominations to give out and 100 people applied, well, then you have a 10% chance of getting the nomination. Now, let's say you live in Texas, different person. And in your district, 50 people apply for the nomination to the Air Force Academy. The amount of nominations is still fixed at 10. So only 10 can win out of 50. So you have a 20% chance. So your statistical likelihood of winning a nomination is highly dependent upon how many people apply within your district or state. So how do you know whether you live in a competitive district or state, you may ask? Well, 2 factors. 1, the districts with the highest military presence that have a residence in your district, sons and daughters of Army veterans that are probably going to have, kids that the Army veterans are probably going to have kids that might want to go to West Point, more than likely than a average civilian. Okay. So if you live in an area that is a high military presence, you probably live in a competitive district. The second factor is high socioeconomic levels. So high socioeconomic areas we see as a proxy for higher performing high schools, implying that there are lots of smart driven students gunning for competitive colleges, the academies being one of them. Okay. The combination of the two is where you have the absolute most competitive districts. Okay. And before you determine this, look at how they draw the lines, which also changes over time based on census data. In 2020, there was a lot of redistricting that was going on, a lot of lines that were being drawn. You might think you live in an area, but in your metropolitan area, you've actually been cut out and you are actually in a different district than you assume. Okay, so look at where they draw the lines. This is what we do for our clients. We look at where they draw the lines. We look at the census data on that congressional district to find out where we think, how competitive we think your district is. Okay, now there's one more wrinkle to this. All nomination applications ask you to rank order your academy preferences. And most, not all, I would say on average, more than 50% of congressmen or senators are more than likely only going to award you your top academy, only going to award you a nomination to your top academy because it's so competitive. So if that's the case, then your statistical likelihood is not only dependent on how many people apply within your district or state, but also how many people put your number one choice as their number one choice. Think if you live in Maryland and you want to apply to the Naval Academy. Think if you live in Colorado Springs and you want to apply to the Air Force Academy. So if your number one matches their number one, your competitor's number one, that also is going to lead to hyper competitiveness. Now, most don't know this, but federal law also dictates that the academies must, by law, offer one person from each district. It's 435 plus 100, that's 535 people out of a class. They only offer 1,200 people a year, roughly. So 535 must go out as long as they have a qualified applicant in that district, which last year, the Naval Academy said they only had 3 districts that didn't have a qualified applicant. 500 of the 1,200 are taken off the board by those that get ranked number one in their district. The one that the academy wants the most out of those 10 is going to get the appointment for sure. And then they might even move on to number 2 or number 3. But bottom line, if you win your district, you're going to win the appointment, or if you win on the senator slate. So action items, get organized, find the deadlines and requirements of each of your nomination source, demystify this process. Second, heavily consider your preferences list based on where you live. And third, if you win your district, win the appointment. Okay, we are moving on to the timeline. Let's begin with the end in mind here. Academies are going to notify you second semester of your senior year by April 15th. And then basic training for the academies is last week of June. Moving back from there, the academies, the sections are academy is on top, that's in blue, nomination requirements are in the middle, and ROTC timeline is in green. For those that are applying to ROTC scholarships, which almost everyone applies to ROTC scholarships as a backup, it's a fantastic option. So we put all three on one, okay? And the navy blue we'll talk about in a second. All right. So in red are is your deadline. Your deadline for the academies and for congressional nominations. Okay. So for the academies, it's actually up here, the actual dates, but it's usually January 31st, somewhere in there. So it's in the winter of your senior year. Now, what's in green is an example of an application completion date, because when you complete the application, things trigger. And so we just put as an example of that they're submitting their application in the middle of their first semester. Okay, so October 1st. What we want to stress here is that because the academies are rolling admissions, if you wait until the day before it's due, like most young people like to do, and you procrastinate, you are making it harder on yourself to get an appointment. All of our clients, we put them on a timeline to submit before August 31st, before they even start their senior year or get going on their senior year. Why? Because one, we know that the fall semester of their senior year is the busiest time of their life. Two, we know that if they turn in their application, they'll have the best chance of getting an LOA, which is a letter of assurance. Let me explain a letter of assurance. A letter of assurance comes out in a rolling fashion, like I was explaining earlier. It's reserved for the cream of the crop in the application pool, and they give you an offer contingent upon you getting a nomination and getting medically cleared. But it's a very valuable thing if you can win that. An LOA, a letter of assurance. It's not an appointment, but it is assurance. They're reserving a seat in the class for you. Okay? So that's the second reason to apply early, is to be eligible for an LOA. And the third reason is because you kickstart the DOBMER process early. You get that, you get ahead of the game on the medical, because medical can take a long time, especially if you might need a waiver. Okay, which 20% of the applicant pool does. That's thousands of people. Okay, there's 50,000 people that apply to the academies. 20%, that's a big number. All right, so don't assume just because you don't have anything medically wrong with you right now that you might not need a waiver later. So that is why you would submit in the green line, not putting it all the way over here. So that's the suggestion there. Okay, the academies open up, and the congressional nominations open up over the summer before your senior year. Okay, and before, like early summer, as soon as you get out of school, your junior year, summer seminar takes place at the academies. It's 1 week, an immersive experience for rising seniors on the grounds of the academy. Okay, great opportunity to decide. Well, great opportunity to show interest, one, and two, great opportunity to dip your toe in the water and see if it's for you. Okay, so working backwards, I'm going to start with, actually starting back at the front. I'm going to start with, if you are in 8th grade or you are middle schooler on this call, this is the one thing I want you to know. The day high school starts, it's on. It is on. Everything you do from a performance standpoint in your grades, the classes you take, the grades you get, will be seen by your college admissions when you're 18. So when you're 14 years old, you best be taking your grades seriously and your activities and charting your course, because middle school's over and you treat yourself as a adult, even though I know you're not, but treat yourself with the mindset of, this is my future. I can't mess around anymore, because colleges will see your freshman year more than they will see your senior year. Think about it. You're going to apply to most of your colleges in the fall of your senior year. They're not even going to see your first and second semester. They have 3 years to look at on your transcript. One of those is freshman year, when you're 14, 15, 16 years old. So we've had young people reach out to us, and this is a common pitfall, so I'm stealing my thunder from later, reach out to us, and they got C's their first semester freshman year. And that made a difference on what college they got into and graduated from as 22-year-old. It can make you ineligible for your dream just by blowing it your first semester freshman year. Don't make that mistake. I'm so glad you're on this call to be able to hear that. Freshmen, if you are on this call and you are listening, or you're listening to this recording later, the thing I want you to know is to get involved. Do not be afraid. And I'm looking at this. We recommend 2+ clubs or 2 or more community organizations or clubs, school clubs, and 2 or more sports. 2 and 2. So that means you set foot on your high school campus. You're a freshman. Your eyes wide open. You're just trying to figure out what class to go to, and you're like, if I get good grades, I'll be just fine. No, it's actually not good enough. Part of my job in helping young people is to be honest. That's one of the best ways I can serve you, is to be honest. And we just looked at the scoring system. We just saw that. Athletic activities is carved out. If you don't get involved in sports your freshman year, it actually gets more competitive to get involved later. So no qualms about making the freshman team, right? Should be a little bit more simple. But now you're a junior. You can't, and you haven't, let's say you're a junior and you're like, oh man, I got great grades, but it's just time fly by, and I haven't really tried a sport yet. But I rock climb on the weekends. The athletic activities that they're going to count are going to be organized activities, school sports, varsity sports, or club sports, not hobbies. That's a hobby. Okay. Doesn't count for the academy's sake. It's not a legitimate athletic activity that they're going to count. When you're going back to my analogy, when you're a junior, you're like, oh, I want to try a sport now. Well, now it's varsity. Now you're competing with people that already have 3 years of experience. Much tougher job to do. So put that fear of failure behind you and go try something. You never know how it will work out, because I'm going to tell you, this is the momentum that you can have when you join as a freshman. So for all you freshmen, when you join a club or you join a sport or 2, join a club or 2, this is the momentum that happens. You join, you're a member, you're showing up, and then what we do, there's this process where you're choosing your leadership path, where you're faithfully showing up, and then guess who's going to be team captain in 2 years? Guess who's going to be president of the club in 2 years? Guess who might be treasurer, secretary, vice president, whatever. Those are only available to those that were consistent. And so what you're doing as a freshman is you're planting seed for later harvest. Because end game here, I want you in 4 or more senior leader roles. When I say senior leader, it means I want you in the cabinet. I want you one of the top roles. It doesn't have to be the top, but I want you in a leadership role. So if the club has officers, be an officer. If the sport has team captains, be a captain. If the student council has elected officials, be an elected official. Okay. 4 or more significant leadership roles is end state. So working backwards, that's going to go to those as a freshman that joined, that hit the ground running and decided to get involved. Second thing as freshmen that's really important is challenging yourself academically, right? We said that the transcript wasn't just about grades, right? The transcript is not just about grades. It's also about course load difficulty. So there's a balance here. I don't necessarily advise you to, kill yourself in 7 classes and then get C's in all of them. There's a balance here. We got to be wise. However, those that are getting into the academies, I can tell you, they got 3.8 or 3.9 unweighted GPAs. They're mixed, mostly A's and a few B's. That's typically what's going on. They're in mostly APs and honors classes, or IB, or dual enrollment, dual credit, if they're taking that at junior college, if you don't have the AP or honors at your high school. That's what it looks like in game. And so backing up, if you're taking a while, if you get in the regular Algebra 2, once again, it's a momentum killer. If you took the regular Algebra 2, then you're probably not, your guidance counselor is going to forewarn you that you probably shouldn't be in pre-calc honors. And if you're not in pre-calc honors, you're probably not going to be in calc AB, AP, right? Which is where you need to be as a senior, or even some clients are even in calc 2, calc BC, AP as a senior. So bottom line, the choices you make as a freshman matters. All right. For sophomores, if you are a sophomore on this call, or you're listening to this recording, what I want you to understand, assuming you've done some of those things, if you haven't done what the homework I gave the freshmen, then you need to go back and start there, okay? But assuming you've laid yourself a good foundation, you hit the ground running in your grades and you took it seriously, like I told the 8th graders. You got involved in AP, honors and AP classes. You got involved in 2 or more clubs or community organizations, 2 or more sports. And by the way, 2 or more it can be 1 and be year round, or it can be, three or four clubs, or even one club if it's student council. There is a part of this that is very personalized, okay? But I'm giving generalized advice to help the most amount of people, and that's generally what we are saying, what we find ourselves saying. So getting back to sophomores, SAT prep is going to be critical. Do not put this off. What we are usually telling young people, based on their timeline, based on their leadership roles, and based on what is best for them, what we're usually telling them is get involved in SAT or ACT prep your second semester sophomore year, or your rising junior summer. So one of those, like at the end of your sophomore year, you want to be thinking about SAT, ACT prep, and then taking the SAT or ACT 3 times in the fall of your junior year. All right. Now, why are we saying taking the SAT, ACT 3 times? Sometimes you can hit a home run the first time you show up and you get a 1500 and you're done. You get a 35 and you're done. That's not most people. So congratulations if that's you. But most people, we say 3 times. Why? Because the Academy super score. What that means is you can combine your best math from one test date and your best verbal from a different test date, combine those two, and that adds up to your highest combined score, combining multiple tests. When you take it 3 times, not only are you learning how to do the test better, because the SAT is not a test of IQ, although there's probably a correlation. ACT is not a test of IQ. It primarily is measuring how well you take the SAT. And you need to get good at taking it. That means timing, it means problem sets, it means tutoring, it means how many times you take it. Are you willing to take it more than other people? And the SAT you can take unlimited times. The ACT, I think you can take it up to 12. And you can take it all the way up until December of your senior year. The academies accept all those. Okay, so SAT is a big rock for you as a sophomore. Get that in your horizons, get a strategy around it, and then plan to take it multiple times. What we say is take it 3 or more times by December of your junior year. Why do we say 3 times by December? Because summer seminar applications, so summer seminar you'll attend over in June timeframe, but summer seminar applications open up around here. And when they open up, if you have a score that you're proud of, an above the mean SAT or ACT score, that is going to serve you well for getting into summer seminar, which then can help you get into the academy. So once again, it's building momentum for yourself. What is the mean and what is the goal? What is the mean SAT or ACT? West Point this year was 1320. Air Force Academy and Naval Academy were around 1370, 1380. Okay, so call it 1350 as the mean, or 30 to 31 ACT as the mean. What is the goal for you? The goal, I don't know your proficiency, but in general, the goal is to be significantly above the mean. So 1400 plus for the SAT, 32 plus for the ACT. That's it right here. And why do we say that? Why do we say that? Because the academies are 25% comprised of 25% recruited athletes. And I was one, so I can speak down on them. They bring the mean down. So that's a 1380, Air Force Academy 1380 with 25% being recruited athletes. So if the recruited athletes are averaging a 1200 or 1250, what do you think people that are getting in that are non-recruited athletes, what are they getting? 1450, 1500, right? So this has to be a strategy for you as a sophomore. The other huge factor is now that assuming you've gotten involved in your high school or your community, okay? It's a process called Choose Your Leadership Path is what we're a big fan of. This is a process where you're involved in a lot of things, okay? Let's say you're involved in 6 or 7 activities, either on campus or off campus, counting your sports. So you play 3 sports, you're involved in a club, 2 or 3 clubs, member, and you're involved in a couple community organizations. Let's just say, okay? That means you're really doing your job. You're getting involved in a lot of things as a freshman. You're dabbling, but it's all to experiment as a freshman to see what you like and what you're good at and where the opportunities are. The combination of the 3 is going to be where your greatest advantage lies. So we always are talking to young people in client meetings about what are you good at? What are you passionate about? And where's the opportunity? And it's like a Venn diagram that overlaps. That's where you should probably be focusing your time, because you can't be involved in everything, or you can be involved in a lot of things, but you can't lead everything. And so it's going to be top of the funnel and it's going to go down like this to where you can focus on what's most effective in order to getting the leadership path, with the goal of having 4 more significant leadership roles. Now, when we say significant, what do we mean? The more selective and the more recognizable, the more significant. So if it's a club nobody's ever heard of, it's probably not very recognizable. The Academy of Missions probably won't know what it is. If it's National Honor Society, everyone knows what that is. If it's knitting club, probably not very selective. If it's student council, very selective. Everyone knows that that's what that is, and that's selective. So therefore, more points are associated with it. So you see, selective and recognizable. I gave you an example of both. Now we've talked about, I'm going back to our agenda, scoring system. We talked about the congressional nomination process. We talked about the timeline. I'm going to give you 2 places. We've talked about this a lot, but throughout. I'm going to give you 2 places that are common pitfalls for underclassmen. Number 1, common pitfall. They don't know if they're on track. They're either overconfident of themselves because they don't respect how truly competitive this process is, or they're underconfident of their candidacy and they're ruling themselves out before they've even gone through the process because they're down on themselves. Maybe they go to a super competitive school, or maybe they have really hard charging parents, or maybe they have a sibling that already went to the academy, or a parent that already went to the academy, and they're underconfident. Either way, they don't know if they're on track because they don't have the clarity. In our underclassmen program, we do a 360 assessment on you. We compare you versus the typical academy. We ask for a lot of your data through a private folder. You upload a lot of your information so that we can basically be a mock admissions board on you before you even go through the admissions board. And that's how Academy endeavors groom young people for success, build their candidacy for success. And every single one of our underclassmen clients from 2 years ago has an appointment. Every single one, 100%. Number 2 is most underclassmen are not clear on where you need to go. In our underclassmen program, we create a personalized 360 plan for you with action steps and milestones that we then follow up every quarter with you to hold you accountable to those, or hear feedback and readjust the plan accordingly as life happens. This is where we see mega results because we're looking at the picture and we have the view of the academies, and we can see clearly where you need to go and course correct while there's still time. It's something we want you to understand as a freshman or a sophomore in the 8th grade. You still have time. You realize seniors are waiting right now to find out. They don't have time. They're just playing a waiting game. You have an advantage because you have choices ahead of you, yes, but also time to build that file, that admissions file that's going to go before the admissions board. Those are the 2 common pitfalls that we see a lot of young people fall into. And so if you don't believe me, we're going to actually share a video. Don't take my word for it. The Dean of Admissions at West Point was interviewed on Fox News, and this was 2 years ago in July, around 4th of July.
West Point is considered among the best schools in America. It's also very difficult to get into. So how can students stand out when applying? Joining us now is West Point Deputy Director of Admissions, Lieutenant Colonel Rance Lee. A good guy to know if you want to get into West Point. What he thinks of you or your kids will determine a lot about whether they come to this amazing institution. Colonel, thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
Well, first, walk me through the application process. If someone wants to go to West Point, how do they do that?
Typically, we open up the application process to juniors in their 2nd semester around February. Once they decide they want to apply, they just they go to our website, fill out a candidate questionnaire, and from there, we'll decide probably around the June timeframe, if we're going to give them access to what we call the actual application or the candidate kit.
Oh, so there's almost a pre-application. Then you say, okay, yeah, you can go ahead and apply.
Yes.
Now, I've heard of, I know that congressmen and senators are involved. How does that involved in the process also? And we're showing it on our screen, kind of the points as how you apply.
So within that process, so when West Point was set up back in 1802, they wanted to make it geographically diverse across the country. They wanted the farmer's kid to have the same chance as the merchant's kid.
Yeah.
So the way they did that was with the congressional nomination piece. So everyone who applies to West Point must have a nomination, and that's the legal authority for West Point to offer you an appointment. And so within that system, it's kind of a parallel system. So each member of Congress has their own method for how they want to, attract and vet their constituents who are applying for nomination.
And they only get a certain number of people from their district that they can nominate,
Yes.
correct?
So typically in a given year, every member of Congress will have one vacancy to fill. And for that one vacancy, they can nominate a slate of up to 10 to fill that vacancy.
Wow. So getting to know, or at least getting in touch with your local congressman or senator's office, pretty important. And then also you mentioned if you're from a military family or a military retiree, those kids also have another avenue to apply to West Point.
Yes, so we have the congressional nomination piece, but we also have service-connected nomination. Those are sons and daughters of career and retired military, as well as the soldiers in our total force. So active guard and reserve also have a.
What are you looking for on an application? What do you want to see when you're bringing in the men and women who will be future officers in the Army?
So definitely want to see academic prowess, because West Point is a very difficult academic institution. We're looking at leadership, because we are the premier leader development institution in the world. So we're definitely looking at what those kids did in high school, and if they're soldiers, what they're doing, either in the active guard or reserve component.
And how many applications are you getting each year, more or less?
So last year, for this class of 2026, we had almost 13,000 applicants.
13,000 applicants for how many slots?
So we brought in last Monday, we brought in 1,209.
1,209. So very selective. You're looking at now. So, by the way, it's July 2nd, and that field that's a live shot is packed full of cadets.
Yes.
Why are they here on July 2nd?
So this is the class of 2026. These are our new cadets. So they are going through cadet basic training right now.
So they go through cadet basic training.
There's about 1 minute left.
Of all, listen to
the end of this.
Of the 13,000 that met the credentials and qualifications.
Yes, these are the chosen 1,209.
These are the chosen 1,209. Now they're here for cadet basic training. What's the attrition rate once they're here? I mean, because it is arduous academically, physically, to finish West Point also.
So over a 4-year period, the attrition rate's probably about 20%.
20%?
Yes.
Interesting. And most of them make it through the first summer of basic training?
Most of them make it through the first summer of basic training, yes.
Got it. What was your biggest piece of advice to a family out there that says, hey, I've got an 8th grader, and I might want them to go to West Point someday. I've got a bunch of young kids, man, I'd love to see them serve their country. What's your advice?
So for an 8th grader, what I would tell them is they need to understand that what you do in 9th and 10th grade is probably more important than what you do in 12th grade, because you cannot dig yourself out of a hole. You have to set the academic, foundation, because that's 60% of our evaluation. So if you do not set up and take the right classes or not do well in those classes, you're gonna dig a hole that you probably won't be able.
So the assessment basically starts in 9th grade. Academically, as far as what. It's a great tip. So if you're out there, you can maybe coast in 7th and 8th grade, but by 9th grade, you want to be here, you better lock it in.
Absolutely.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much.
Great
Appreciate
pleasure.
your time. Thanks for having us here.
Don't take my word for it. Take the Dean of Admissions. He was the Deputy Director of Admissions a couple years ago when he was interviewed, but now he's the Dean of Admissions. He's in charge. We want to invite you guys to join our underclassmen program. We only take 40 a year. We give you one-on-one advice throughout, and then you join up with an underclass cohort for your quarterly follow-ups. This is really to get you on track to get into the academy. To take the first step, we've already had about 10 takers, so we have about 30 slots left for the year. And we just got going. So we just launched at the beginning of this year. So we would be excited to have you. So take advantage of that link. Click on that link before you get off tonight, or do it right now.